Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's January 22nd, 2025, and we're 3 days in to the Trump presidency, part two, and we're dealing with a much different world than we were beforehand, but before Inauguration Day, but it's not as bad as you think. And that's what we're going to talk about so far. And that's what we're going to be talking about mostly today. And again, as we do each week with the Midweek Roundup, this is our Wednesday live chat on international ed topics that are critical to our jobs in international education here in the U.S. We're impacted by things that go on far beyond our own campuses, beyond our own borders as a country. There are global implications to what we do and things that impact what we do that happen in other countries and things that we can learn from other countries. And that's what we talk about each week. This week will be very U.S. focused on the impact of Trump 2.0 and what that's going to mean in terms of partnerships, in terms of regulations, and most importantly, our students. So we'll talk about all of those here today on the Roundup. We do each week take the questions that we answer on Wednesday afternoons. We take those from our newsletter, and that newsletter comes out on Mondays at 9 a.m. Eastern if you're subscribing via email. I'm going to drop in the link to our newsletter, first off, I'll drop in the link to our website at smieconsulting.org. That is where you can go, smieconsulting.org/subscribe, and that's going to be where you can subscribe to the email version of the newsletter. We also give you an opportunity to get that in your email inbox Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, and I'll drop the link to this week's edition into the chat as well. And we're going live on Facebook, on Twitter, not on Twitter because they make it difficult for you now, on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So we're grateful that you're joining us either live or on repeat. And I know we've got some folks in the room who said they were going to be stopping by today. So thanks for joining in the conversation, or at least listening in to what we have to say today about the state of our nation as it relates to international education. The other option besides getting the newsletter via email is via LinkedIn, and we've dropped the link to this week's edition on the LinkedIn site in the chat as well. And between the two versions, we now have over 2,300 subscribers in the international ed profession that are getting the newsletter each week, and it's just such an honor and humbling to know that so many folks are getting this content each week for the newsletter, sharing our thoughts on what's going on in our profession and how some of the news we hear can help impact us in a positive way in terms of what we do, keeping in the know. And that's one of the things I realize. I'm a practitioner too. I work full-time on a university campus. I just transitioned from 3.5 years at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas to I was working remotely for them from home in Ohio, and have now transitioned to a remote job for University of Akron, shorter distance away, only 2-hour drive as opposed to a 4.5-hour flight. So started that job at the beginning of the month, and have just a few days into it now, really enjoying the new team. I'm working with some old friends as well that I've done some consulting with in the past, so I'm really happy to be helping build their international enrollment management plan. So I'm a practitioner, and the reason I said that and bring that up is because I know what it's like to be in our jobs, being on campus, being in our profession where we have hundreds of students that we're responsible for. There are multiple vendors we're dealing with every week. We have agent relationships we need to manage, potential partner universities overseas we need to manage. So I know the stresses of our jobs, and certainly if you're on the immigration side, you're dealing with SEVIS outages over the last few weeks. That has been a huge burden on you. And at this time of a year when you're trying to bring in a new group of students in January from overseas and not being able to register them and check information on new students, update I-20s, do all these wonderful things that we know you have to do. I know those stresses. And I know oftentimes we just get so laser focused on our institutions, on our students, that we don't have time to look up and see the bigger picture. And I realized certainly when I was just doing my consulting how important that was for to provide something of value to you free of charge. The newsletter is free. The Midweek Roundups here are free, to provide some context for you. You can listen to this while you're working out or going for a walk or when you're having your lunch, whatever it might be. You can read the newsletter in about 10 minutes each week. So we want to give you these kind of bite-sized doses of content that can help you think through some things that you might not ordinarily have a chance to see and process. So hopefully you find this value. We're going to get right into our first question, and that is what all of these are new administration focused, because that's what's front and center on all our minds right now. Since the whirlwind of Inauguration Day on Monday compared to with all the executive orders and now the speeches and the politics that's being thrown up, the nominations, all of these other things, it's it's hard not to have your head spin. And for me, I'll start off with where I was 8 years ago on Inauguration Day. I was working at a university here in town. We had just we were shooting our last part of our university video for the "You Are Welcome Here" campaign. So if you've been around the profession for at least 8 years, you know what that is. That's what was started in shortly after the election in 2016, in November, December. "You Are Welcome Here" started as a reaction to the election of the first time for President Trump, and his rhetoric on immigration, anything immigration related, was under threat. So we all most of us in the U.S., if our campuses were supportive, and most of ours were, we got on board and we started shooting videos that had our students saying it, had our staff saying "You Are Welcome Here," multiple languages, all of that fun stuff. So our office was the last one on campus to shoot. The international office, we had a team of 8, and we're shooting our part of that video that was going to go in for our university version. And as we're shooting it, literally as we're shooting the final scenes of it, as all our staff are saying "You Are Welcome Here," and I do a little snippet on our international office to round out the video, I'm seeing we have TV screens up in our international office in the waiting room, and it scrolls across during the orientation the executive orders that had just been signed, and there were what became known as the Muslim travel bans to 7 countries, only 5 of which are Muslim majority. So that was our Inauguration Day 8 years ago. I was on a campus experiencing that, and the shock of that, and then the PTSD that many of us have been feeling this week about, oh, here we go again, trying to prepare ourselves mentally for what we're about to experience. Well, the good news is we didn't have any travel bans on the first day. We had some executive orders on birthright citizenship that are probably going to are already being challenged in the courts and are unlikely to see the light of day and actually become law. We've seen the immigration raids that are targeting violent criminals that are in the country illegally, that are being targeted now for deportation by ICE. So there's all sorts of stuff going on related to immigration, but it's not nearly as bad as it was that first day in the first administration. So right now, knock on wood, we're okay for the most part. None of us are really happy with some of his proclamations on other parts of life in society, and I know I've seen posts from colleagues that are just despairing, frankly, on what's going to happen, and some of the dismantling of things like DEI, and recognizing that the U.S. government recognizing now that there's only one gender, or 2 genders, excuse me, and the impacts of that. So there's all sorts of pain in our field right now, in higher ed in the United States, for more than half of the country, or for less than half of the country, that aren't happy that he's in power again. So let's talk about the specifics here. 3 specific things I want to talk about today related to this. First up is, what will Trump 2.0 mean for U.S.-China partnerships? We've already seen a few China, as was the first time pre-COVID, when Trump took over. There were talks of what to expect from Trump in a second administration, and certainly the relationships with China so far, it's all at least what he's been talking about has all been tariff related, and this is part of his game. He's the great negotiator, the art of the deal, all of those things, things that he likes to take credit for. There are two stories that are particularly relevant today. One is University of Michigan partnership with Shanghai Jiaotong University in China. That partnership has been canceled between the University of Michigan and that institution because of national security implications. It was actually recommended by House members that I think have oversight in Michigan. That partnership has been canceled. We've over the last 8 years, we've seen Confucius Institutes close, left, right, and center. But partnerships as they relate to U.S. and Chinese institutions seem to be under threat. And we all know that it's STEM-related, national security-related academic areas that are most under the microscope. There are new regulations related to documenting any funding and partnerships between U.S. and Chinese institutions that the U.S. government has required, and much more detailed levels of documentation that institutions have to provide as to what the nature of the relationships are, where money that is coming from the Chinese side is being used. Programs like the 1,000 Talents programs are probably done in the United States as a promotional tool from China to the U.S. to get access to our talent in the professorial ranks, researcher ranks, to go to China. So those things are probably, I've seen their last days. We've seen, but are there still partnerships that can work? A colleague of mine, Charles Sun in China, has been a very prolific writer on transnational education in China over the last few years. And certainly I've dropped in a link to one of his his take on what Chinese-U.S. institutional partnerships might look like. And certainly there's still a great thirst for those kind of partnerships. Some that are Ministry of Education level approved, some are just for state or province level institutions. There might be easier ways to get those kind of programs approved. In terms of the kinds of programs, yes, certainly those high-tech national security potential implicated academic programs are probably going to be off the table, but how far does that go? Does it affect all STEM programs, or is that just in those high sensitive area ones? We're not quite sure on that, but there may be still possibility to do those. So I think that's where we're coming on partnerships. I think there's going to be some slow going. I don't think there's going to be a huge ramp up of interest necessarily, and the partners you choose, you'll need to be very careful about and make sure that you're getting them vetted from a lot of different angles, not just from your general counsel and government relations folks, but having potentially folks on the ground in China that might have a better sense of the connectedness of institutions to the civil-military fusion strategy that was part of this China initiative that banned relationships between U.S. and U.S. and Chinese institutions Chinese institutions that might be funded by this Chinese military. So those are concerns that are still legit and will need to be vetted very, very carefully. So probably this is a slower movement on any significant kinds of partnerships. I know at my previous institution, I've talked about this before I left, that they have actually are in the process of starting a Chinese Language and Culture Institute at UNLV. That's not funded as it was through Hanban in China and funding the faculty that would come and teach the classes and giving up of academic control of the program. That doesn't exist in this UNLV model. It's completely UNLV run in partnership with Sands Corporation, one of the major chains, casino chains and resort chains that are based in Las Vegas. So that's going to be, yes, we'll probably hire faculty from these other institutions, but we'll pay them, not the Hanban folks. that were part of the Confucius Institute structure. So it's a very different model. That will probably be an outlier, frankly, for Chinese language and culture programs in the U.S. Certainly, institutional partnerships will maybe see some growth, but not significant, not fast-moving growth, I don't think. But ones that we can at least dip our toes in the water and see very carefully whether or not it's doable and will have the blessings of all parties involved, particularly on the U.S. side. So there's hope, but it's not the death knell, I don't think, because even through the worst parts of the first Trump administration, institutions that had partnerships for years were still investing in those relationships because they value the exchange, the academic exchange that happens, the person-to-person exchange, the cultural exchange that has to happen as we operate in this world that we live in, because it's increasingly smaller. So that's the first topic of the day, or question of the day. Trump 2.0 for Chinese relationships will probably be slower than the last 4 years under Biden, but certainly it's not going to be non-existent. Let's just put it that way. So the next question is, will H-1B and OPT survive the next 4 years? This is probably on the long-term strategic piece when you of the issues that impact what we do in international education. We know in the last 4 years, last 3 years in particular, our major competition, Canada, UK, Australia, have undergone significant change in terms of government policy. That has negatively impacted those countries' reputation and ability to enroll increasingly more international students. Canada hit their wall a couple of years ago with almost 1 million students, both at the vocational and higher ed levels. You saw the UK implement the dependent study ban, where dependents of master's level students or younger could not come with students who were becoming for master's degrees. You saw in Australia the caps put on this year with the ministerial directives, initial one and then the new one that was just updated, to cap and higher ed enrollments up 270,000 this year. There was a 30% cut last year to Canada. They're seeing similar numbers this year, maybe a little less, but overall significant drops. Of the three major partners, the UK is probably the least affected, only down 17% as opposed to 30 or 35%. But the UK is also dealing with institutions that are 70% of which are in severe financial difficulty and have had to rely on international students to kind of dig themselves out of financial holes and become, frankly, overly reliant on international students. And Canadian, Australian, and UK universities all are experiencing that. And the drop-offs that the government actions are taking because of impacts on housing, on health services, on transportation, all those issues have led to the restrictions that the governments have put in place, because they have become so heavily dependent on internationals, 25-30% or more at many institutions of their students being international. Now with the cuts, their finances are hurting, and some are near bankruptcy in some of these destination markets. So are we? One of the things we have going for us in the United States is, and have had since 2008, is STEM OPT. And that's STEM OPT for 3 years, potentially leading to H-1Bs for up to 6 years, and all of that. We know H-1B is not perfect. It's a lottery system, and so it's not really based on fairness, if you want to call them that. It's luck, depending on which tech firm is submitting their application, how they game the system, submitting multiple applications for the same person from different locations. So there's some real, in the run-up to the election, there was talk about the future of OPT. We had the OPT challenge this past administration, the Washington case that actually was upheld in the Supreme Court, upheld the validity of OPT. So that survived, but will it be permanent? Or will there be future challenges? Probably. H-1B is also being seriously discussed as to, is in its current form, does it work? Does it maximize the potential we have as a country for bringing in the best talent to fill voids in our economy where there are skilled positions in STEM fields and others that we can't fill from U.S. population? So did hear something. We didn't get the travel bans yet. We haven't had any bans on OPT or H-1B or anything like that yet. Whether we will or not, that's still too early to say. But there was in one of the whirlwind press conferences that Trump has been taking. It seems like he's answered more questions in the last 3 days than Biden did in 4 years from the press directly. There was a quick fire round where he was just taking questions and answering short answers. Someone asked him about what do you feel about H1? How do you feel about H1B? And he said something like, "Well, I understand the arguments on both sides." So, but he was non-committal about what that meant. So we've seen this topic on OPT and H1B. We saw during the campaign. He had this podcast where he promised he'd give green cards to all U.S. or all graduates, international student graduates of U.S. colleges, even associate's degrees up through PhDs, would give them all green cards. That was quickly withdrawn by campaign officials, but is that nugget still in there? He's having a podcast with Silicon Valley folks that are dependent on some of this international talent. So we're not sure who's going to win this battle, whether it's going to be the hard right MAGA folks or if it's going to be the Doge Bros. The Doge Bros with Musk and Ramaswamy. Looks like Ramaswamy's kind of getting off the Doge bus because he's probably going to be running for governor of Ohio, where I am, and but they both being former internationals themselves, or at least their families. In Ramaswamy's case, are folks that are very supportive of H-1B and international students and see the value and all of that. So which side of who's going to win out in Trump's brain? And if the tech side seems to be dominating right now with all the just did their AI announcement today with Larry Ellison and CEO of Larry Ellison from Oracle and Sam Friedman from Friedman? No. The guy from OpenAI and the chairman from SoFi that pledged between the three of them $500 billion AI tech investment in the next few years. If anybody remembers the 90s movie Stargate, that's being resurrected as part of this AI initiative. It's going to be an AI center in Texas called Stargate. That's the new AI kind of our attempt in the U.S. to win back our control in that area. That seems like the tech side of things is winning out, and if that happens, then the talent we have in this country domestically isn't enough to support those initiatives. We're going to need more talent from abroad to fill those jobs, and so H-1B is going to be a significant piece of that. Whether that gets reworked and streamlined and maybe expanded to allow more institutions to be involved. We've seen the rise of entrepreneurs in residence programs that tap into the OPT piece that allows universities, H-1B actually, to hire international graduates because we're exempt from the H-1B caps that everyone else is subject to in the U.S. To hire these international students, and where we hire them part-time to work for the university, 10, 15 hours, but the remainder of their hours every week is dedicated to growing their startup business that they might be doing. Those kind of programs exist. I don't know if any of your campuses are doing them. I'd love to hear if they are, but those might be part of the future of these kind of initiatives that are outside the box kind of thinking, and hopefully show the value to what the U.S. can and should be doing in the tech side and U.S. government providing the regulatory structure that supports that, the expansion of programs like that. So there's still hope on that front, and that if we maintain that or expand what we're doing on the OPT side, on the H-1B side, even snowball's chance that we get the green cards for all international grads, which I'm not going to put my house on, but certainly that would be those would be game changers if that happens, and make the U.S. an even more attractive destination to some of the top talents in the world. So there's hope there, and that's probably the area that I'm most hopeful for, is that if the tech bros went out in terms of convincing Trump that they need a better regulatory environment to support their hiring practices, which are inevitably going to include international student graduates. I think there's a lot of hope there for, amongst everything else that seems to be against things that we stand for in higher education, that are being dismantled and destroyed in the next few weeks and months or days. We are now seeing that that's probably one area on the OPT side. If we can have that bolstered, have H-1B expanded, those are areas that, if that happens, will be significant boosts to the U.S. as a destination, and would bring us, frankly, more in alignment with, frankly, what I've been talking about lately in the newsletter, especially in the last couple of weeks, about what's happening in East Asia. A lot of East Asian countries, for various reasons, are aligning national economic policy, immigration policy, and international education policy to seamlessly work together for the benefit of the nation. And we talk about this endlessly here through SMIE Consulting and through our 6 Ps of Strategic International Enrollment Management. We always mention how the way we're set up in the U.S. is counterproductive, frankly, in a lot of different ways, because you're on the national level, you have 4 or 5 different departments, federal departments, that have different missions when it comes to education. They each touch on it, international education. They each touch on it, state, commerce, homeland security, education, Department of Labor. All of those have very different missions that impact the education field and what we do in international ed. So I would be hopeful that on the OPT side, we're going to see, and H-1B side, we're going to see some positives coming. So that's it for question number 2. I do want to finish today with a piece that brings home everything we do in international education to its core. As we're here for our students, and our international students on the inbound side are the reason our jobs exist. The reason why $42 billion a year comes into the U.S. economy, because of those students that support our jobs. And they are our reason for being where we are. They are our passion to support them in bringing them and helping them to come to the U.S. and achieve their dreams through the education and experiences they get on our campuses, in our communities. They are why we do what we do, and why I do what I do. And those students, I'm actually going out on Friday, going out to the Akron campus. We're having a Make-Up International orientation for our new students that start this spring. And that's always an exciting time of year, probably one of the most exciting times of year, to feed on the enthusiasm of these new students as they come to campus, as they've made it through the various hoops that they've had to jump through to get to the United States, to then be on our campuses and finally able to start their academic pursuits with us. And that's always a great time of year, and I love that. And got some objectives that I have on Friday to meet with those students. But one of the first things I'm going to do is just say, for our current students, there's obviously excitement for our students that have just arrived, but for those that have been here a while and maybe they're from countries that might be impacted by the Lake and Riley bill that's about to be signed by Trump this afternoon. When that happens, the threat is in the language of the bill that individual states have the ability to restrict visas that are issued to people from countries that are problem areas, that certain states are seeing significant challenges with some of the migrant populations that have impacted their communities, that the states would have the ability to say to certain countries, no, you can't come. And that would impact a state forcing the federal government, Department of State, that issues the visas overseas, whether that's even legal or not is another challenge, to be able to do that. But certainly there are parts of the Lake and Riley bill that, in terms of protections for against migrant violence and acts of violence and crimes committed against by these migrants against Americans. The value of that is it's a bipartisan effort. That's why it's the first bill that he's going to sign. There are concerns on the legality of what is being done, as with many of these executive orders, like the birthright citizenship verification for those that come to the United States to have a child, or have a child while they're in the United States on either as DACA or another visa status. It's a lot of the commentators typically go to the worst case extreme, and that would apply to anybody who's in the U.S. who isn't a natural born citizen. That would be the very extreme, and much like these raids that are going on, that everybody's fearing it's going to be just mass roundups and deportations, where the initial focus is right now on the worst of the worst criminal offenders. So there's a lot of potential negativity that we're having to deal with, that our students are hearing it, particularly if they're in one of the countries, from one of the countries that has significant migrant populations coming. Obviously, it's not just Latin America anymore, but there's a lot of other nations that have sent many migrants to the U.S. Over the last 4 years. So we'll see what happens with that. But I say the question is, have you checked in on your international students yet? And this is something we should be doing anyway, but particularly at a time when the transition of power and the thankfully peaceful transition of power that we experience in the United States that has happened this time around, we need to celebrate that. And I've seen some colleagues doing that on LinkedIn and other areas, and that is something we do need to celebrate. And that, as though there may be legal questions on some of the things that are being done, doesn't mean that they are not valued on our campuses, that we won't protect them on our campuses and do everything we can to advocate for them on our campuses and in our communities. That's our job. And it reminds us, these kind of transition times remind us on how important our role is in supporting them in what they do. And that's why most of us do what we do in this field, is we got into it to see students realize their dreams through study in the U.S. and experiences they can have here. So that's all we have for you this week on the Roundup. So thanks so much for being a part of the conversation. Looking forward to chatting with you in the months and weeks to come. Have a great day.